listening to the Film Monsters Podcast with Nate and Ray.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another spooky episode of the Film Monsters Podcast. I'm Nate.
And I am Ray.
And Ray, I have been having a lot of fun doing this. I don't know about you, but I honestly just wish that it was October all year round.
I do too. I had someone at work telling me the other day, because I bought a giant animatronic for my front yard, and this girl at work was like, man, you take this holiday way too serious. And I looked at her, I was like, yes, I do. This is like my pilgrimage leading to Halloween.
It's so awesome. I feel like too, like, I don't know how it is in Utah right now, but in Ohio, all the leaves have fallen. It's like getting a little chillier. I've been, going out on walks during the day, and it's just so nice to feel that atmosphere, see like people putting their Halloween decorations in the front yard. And it's just an exciting time to be a horror fan, I feel like, because, we talked about at the beginning of this whole thing about, like, what horror means to us and why we got into those movies. And sure, we watch these movies all year round and we care about them all year round, but there's something about, like, being in that spirit with that weather and, like, seeing decorations that just kind of makes the impact of those movies even more.
Unfortunately, here in Utah, since climate change isn't real, wink, wink, it's still actually kind of warm, and all the leaves are still up.
It's like 65 every day here, which is so nice. Wearing a hoodie every single day, but it's just so exciting, and we've been having a blast. And also, I've been having a lot of fun with the 31 Wax Hauntings Challenge. I've been having a lot of fun reading people's comments, and I've been really excited to see how many people have been participating, and also people that have jumped in at random spots that didn't even start the first week. And I feel like every day I see more and more posts, and it's been really cool to see that interaction.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I've been excited. I've been trying to reshare like as many as humanly possible. If I see one, and that's why I keep asking people to tag us, if I see one, I will throw it up and reshare it, because hopefully, like, our Instagram is not like huge. We don't have the biggest of followings, but hopefully, like, just be amongst our followers, they're seeing each other's posts and hopefully creating connections with other people within this weird community we all have going on.
Well, what's been cool for me too is I've seen a lot of albums posted that I'd never even heard of before, which has been really neat to like go check out some of them just based on the album artwork. And I think that's another cool part about it, is like having that engagement, but also at the same time maybe discovering some form of media that you may not have checked out otherwise.
Yeah, I even seen like, and some people have gotten really creative, like for the prompt of the drinks, somebody like outlined the date with like just beer bottle caps, and I thought that was kind of cool. Just like people have gotten creative too, which has been really cool to see.
It's been so much fun, and we really appreciate you guys for taking part and joining in on the challenge. Ray and I are having a lot of fun doing it ourselves, so if you have been doing it, we really appreciate it. And even if you're hearing this episode towards the tail end of October and you want to get involved in it, head over to the Film Monsters Podcast and jump in. We'll be excited to see what you have to post. And speaking of being excited about something, Ray, I finally got to see a little film called Barbarian, and I have been so excited to talk about it with you.
Oh, pray tell, pray tell.
Yes, so before we get into this, Ray and I are going to talk about some spoilers. I'm going to put a time code in the description of the episode to where you can skip ahead to if you have not seen this movie, because if you have not seen this movie, you don't want to know anything about it. Go in as blindly as possible, because Ray and I will both tell you it is a wild experience. So if you check that time code in the episode description, you can skip ahead and not have anything spoiled for you.
Sounds good. Having said that, what did you think of it?
I loved it. I think it was one of my favorite film-going experiences of the entire year. I honestly did not have, like, you see online, like, all these people say, oh, you're never going to expect where this is going to go or how this movie is going to play out. And I didn't. And what you said about it in the episode before, it delivered. I feel like this movie took more twists and turns than I could have imagined. And what you said in the episode, sure, when one of the twists happens, which is the people living underneath the house, that's something that we've seen in movies before. But I feel like the storytelling and the fleshing out of the characters and how like almost non-linear the story was told really kind of added a very different element to it that I don't think we see a lot in films anymore.
Well, and I thought that was a really interesting choice because the first act, you're like tension building, like Bill Skarsgård's character. What is he? Why is he so awkward? Why is he so weird? You have that amazing scene when she goes for her job interview and she hadn't seen the neighborhood lit up until that moment, and you realize it's just this neighborhood that may as well not be a neighborhood. You're still kind of tense about Bill Skarsgård, you know, he's having those night terrors, so you're like, there's something off with this guy. And then you get the scene where he gets killed.
He gets literally obliterated. Like, I felt so bad for him. His head got smashed against that wall. Like, and they did not pull back from that. Like, it was violent. But what I wanted to say about that tension at the beginning, too, is the cinematography at the beginning of the film was amazing. The heavy focus on the camera being zoomed in on, like, the doorknobs when she's locking the door. And when she'd forget to lock the door. I feel like they did such a great job building that tension. And even like the scene where he was sitting at the table by himself with the wine bottle and he's like, hey, I didn't want you to think something weird was going on, so I didn't open this before you came in here. I wanted to wait so that you could enjoy yourself with me. And she's like off put by it at first, and then she kind of like caves and does it when she finds out that he's a part of this world that she's very familiar with. And it's just really great character writing.
Well, and not only that, but like when I thought about it in hindsight, because when I was watching, I was like, this dude is so weird. But in the world we live in, where there's guys out there that want to prove, hey, we're actually nice guys. We're not like these creepers that, unfortunately, due to all of this macho BS going on in the world, we haven't done any favors for ourselves as men. So seeing this and thinking in hindsight, I'm like, I think I would be the same way. I would try to be overly careful with everything I did to not bring up like the wrong ideas, but doing that to such an extent almost is more detrimental than anything else.
Oh, yes, completely. There's some really great conversations in this film, and I think when Justin Long's character gets introduced, even more so. And it's similar to, we were discussing another film before the podcast that will probably end up getting mentioned later on. But there's something about telling these stories with a little bit more nuance, where it's not like over the top. But that scene where her and Bill Skarsgård are talking to each other, and he's like, hey, I let you come in the house and I let you stay in here, but if it was reversed, you would have never let me do that. Like, you would have never let me in this Airbnb in the middle of the night. And I thought that was such an interesting commentary, and the whole film is really just like a fascinating commentary on, obviously it gets to the point where we're discussing like cancel culture, but just like on the treatment of women and like the perception of women versus men. There's so many amazing things that are commentated on in this film that aren't like super ham-fisted or stupid. It's really done intelligently.
Well, and also, like, there's this whole, like, dichotomy between Bill Skarsgård's character, who turns out to be a legitimately nice guy, albeit a little awkward, and then you have Justin Long's character, who's very outgoing and outspoken, but is an absolute scumbag. And that dichotomy between the two characters was so cool.
My favorite scene in the entire movie was when Justin Long was in the basement measuring the square footage where those cages were.
Yeah, that was...
And he's like, oh, how much extra square footage can I add reselling this? And I'm just like, dude, you're a dirtbag.
Well, then he sees the room, and like he has that expression on his face, like, what is this? And then he just realizes it's an extra room. So instead of questioning like the blood and the bucket and all the weird stuff, he's just like, oh, I can charge more.
And I love the way that the filmmakers pull at you about how to feel about Justin Long's character, because like at the beginning, he's like literally after Bill Skarsgård's head gets crushed, we jump to California and Justin Long's driving in his car. With no explanation. Which is why I said the storytelling in this is just amazing, because you're just added into this other story. And he's driving in a car and he gets a phone call and he says that, or he gets a call from his agency who tell him that someone he's worked with on the set of this new program has accused him of rape. And what's really interesting is the filmmakers at first kind of pull at you as to like whether or not that he legitimately did it. They do like a, oh, maybe, you know, he's not this bad guy. And then there's that scene in the bar, which is like the first time that you're like, okay, this dude is really like a slimy dirtbag. And throughout the movie, they do a good job of like, okay, is this whole situation because he owns that house in Detroit and he's going to go back and try to sell it because he's losing all of his money on these legal cases. And he gets there and you're wondering to yourself, is this going to be his redemptive arc? And I think that's a really fascinating storytelling method.
Well, and the movie kind of goes back and forth with him. Like, I feel like there's moments in the movie where you think, you know, he even says at one point, like, I don't want to die like a scumbag or something like that. And you think he's actually going to make it. And then, you know, you get to the third act and you kind of find out, you know, old habits die hard.
Oh, in the best way possible. But my favorite scene probably in the entire movie is the breastfeeding scene, which made me laugh so hard. I was like, oh, this dude is getting exactly what he deserves. And I love how it was hinted at through like the VHS tape in the basement. I was like, oh, something is gonna happen with this. Like, oh, and also, how gross was it when she was trying to bottle feed him through the cage?
Oh gosh! And she's just like, just drink the bottle.
Yeah, she's like, just fucking do it. And then I just wanted to say before we're done talking about Barbarian, I really loved the cutback to the serial killer who is also living underneath the house, because we're jumped to an era where all the houses around the Airbnb are like cleaned up and you're like, where is this jumping to? And you see him go to the grocery store, this woman's like helping him out, and the way that it's shot, you can tell there's something wrong with him, even though he doesn't deliver any dialogue until he gets to the grocery store, and then you just find out how disgusting of a human being that he is.
Well, and what I loved about it is how that was shot. It's almost like a camera over his shoulder the whole time.
Yes.
Even to the point where he gets to the house and he's stalking that young girl in the yellow dress. And you think he's going to do something to her at that point, and he doesn't. But later on in the movie, you find out that she was a victim of his. But then that part where he walks in with the groceries and he has a conversation with his neighbor, it almost seems like, you know, just like a regular minutia that they're talking about. And then he opens the door and goes into his house and opens the door to the basement. You just hear the screaming and then it cuts out.
And what I think is really interesting too is this additional layer of that, not only this woman who obviously is this creature we're seeing through the film is not the first of her kind. Essentially that she is like a product of inbreeding after inbreeding after inbreeding. And I thought that was like a really disturbing concept that kind of just made the movie. Yeah, yes, there's comedic elements to it. You're laughing at moments in this, but the director, Zach Krieger, who I looked into, was on the sketch comedy show The Whitest Kids You Know. So if you look at someone like Jordan Peele, who has a comedic background, his films obviously have comedic levity in them. It makes sense that there would be these comedic moments amidst this really like brutal, disturbing horror elements.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense when I looked that up too. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, because I remember those skits were just ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely ridiculous. And I want to say, I don't know if it made you gasp, but when he shoved her off the building at the end of the movie, I lost it, dude. I was like, please do not let this be the way she goes out.
Right, and then like he gets his head completely, like, I have never seen such a gory scene be so like satisfying.
Oh, exactly. And I just want to say my favorite soundtrack drop of all time is the very end of the film, the soundtrack drop of the Ronettes' Be My Baby from Dirty Dancing.
Yeah.
Which I went and saw this with Jess. one of Jess's favorite movies of all time is Dirty Dancing, and that song queued up, and she started laughing so hard, and I was like, yeah, this movie's brilliant. We both absolutely loved it, and I just wanted to kind of spin back around and say, Ray, I know you talked about this when you first saw it, but I want more movies like this in the theater. I want to go be surprised. I want to watch movies that are like, and you know, this is towards the tail end of its theatrical runtime. I was in a pretty crowded theater for this movie, and people were getting into it. And they were laughing, and they were having such a great time, and people seemed to genuinely love it. And I really want more movies like this because, you know, as of the recording of this episode, Halloween Ends came out last night. And, you know, people want those properties revisited, and people want to see, like, their favorite franchises revisited, and that's cool. Like, you can do that, and you can enjoy it. But I want to see more original films like this that really take me by surprise. And this was honestly probably some of the most fun I've had at the movie theater all year.
Oh, me too. And just to wrap up, I know that this movie wasn't as high for you as it was for me, but, like, you know, like, for example, this movie, Barbarian, or, like, earlier this year we got The Black Phone. I mean, seeing these kind of new stories come to life, like, sure, Michael Myers is fun, Freddy Krueger is fun, Jason Voorhees is fun, but, like, it's 2022. Those movies are, like, you know, those characters are 30, 40 years old. Like, we need new characters, we need new stories, and I think films like Barbarian or The Black Phone, and I know you really enjoyed Pearl, like, I think it's time for new stories. It's time we turn the page and just start venturing out into new stories again, if that's something I've learned from this year in horror.
Even one of my favorite horror films that was released this year, Smile, which really made me happy, hit $100 million worldwide in the box office as of last weekend. And that to me says people want original horror movies. People want these films that aren't associated with other properties. The fact that a movie like Smile could gross $100 million in the box office is exciting for horror fans, because that means that people are hungry for things like that. They want something more than just those franchises that have already been explored time and time again.
You might say it's making everyone smile at Hollywood.
Oh my absolutely. So that's Ray and I's discussion of Barbarian. I absolutely loved that. And speaking of wanting more original content, Ray and I are going to talk about Shudder today, which, if you're a horror fan and you don't have Shudder, which this isn't sponsored, but Shudder, if you're out there and you're listening, we'll always take a sponsorship from you guys, because we plug you guys shamelessly constantly. But Shudder is a streaming service exclusively providing horror content, and they put classics on there. They put a lot of films, like Ray talked last week about watching like Lucio Fulci's Zombie. They put Nightmare on Elm Street films on there sometimes, Halloween, a lot of the classics. But what they really specialize in is original films and exclusive films. So, like, sometimes they'll, like, originally be the only producers on a movie and put them out, or they'll, like, get exclusive rights from a production company to put a film out. And they have a really amazing catalog. And so Ray and I really wanted to spend today's episode talking about some of these films and kind of highlighting them, because they're not always movies that everyone knows about. And before we get into talking about it, Ray, I just really wanted to quickly ask you, like, what was your introduction to Shudder? What got you interested in watching movies on that platform?
I think, so one of the things that got me interested when Shudder came out, I remember they were still in, like, the beta testing, so, like, the catalog was pretty small. Like, you can easily watch, like, most of the catalog in a couple of weeks if you wanted to. So I got it for, like, dirt cheap. I think they were offering a code, like, get a whole year for, like, $40 or something like that. So I did it, and the reason why I did it is because, and this is a movie that I wanted to include on my list, but I opted not to, mostly for the fact that we fawned over this movie so much that I wanted to give other movies a platform. But, like, it was essentially Mandy. Elijah Wood has a production company called Spectre Vision, and he produced Mandy. And as he was pushing for Mandy, he was also, Shudder picked it up as a Shudder exclusive. and Spectre Vision pushed really hard for people to go check it out on Shudder, which is what I ultimately ended up doing, especially after having seen Mandy in theaters, which was one of my favorite theater experiences. But yeah, that's essentially how I was introduced through Spectre Vision. Shout out to Elijah Wood, formerly Frodo of the Fellowship of the Ring. He is an incredible human being, and I love Elijah Wood and everything he does. So when he started pushing Shudder, I trust the man with horror, so I immediately jumped on it.
I mean, you have to trust the guy with horror who produced The Greasy Strangler. I also love Elijah Wood. I feel like he is probably one of the best voices in not only horror, but like independent filmmaking in general. And I love how, you know, his career really, I mean, he started acting when he was young, but like after Lord of the Rings, I feel like he was like, okay, I did my big budget thing. Now I'm going to do these independent films that I want to support. And that's really cool that that's how you got into it. For me, it was a little less of an exciting story. I was just online one day and saw some people talking about Shudder, and this was really early in its inception as well. I think shortly after the beta testing of it. And it was when they were really kind of throwing around promo codes and trial codes to like, hey, you can try this out for a couple weeks for free. And I did a trial on it, and I think I must have watched in the first 2 weeks like 8 or 9 movies, and I was like, God, I need this. And then I found out how cheap it was to get the subscription, and I'm like, wow, this is really a service that, like, even if I don't love all of the movies that they provide, they're giving these independent filmmakers a platform to put out movies that might not otherwise get seen or heard, and that's exciting. And I have been a Shudder member for years now, and I will never stop, because I will say, I think I use Shudder more than Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, any of those services.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same boat with you. I think I've been using it, especially now. One of the things that with Shudder I kind of struggled at first was that the only way I could actually watch them is if I casted it from my phone, because it was not available on like smart TV devices or anything like that. So for a long time, Shudder was kind of out of sight, out of mind type of thing. And now that they've started expanding, you can find their apps a lot more easily available on smart TVs, which has made my Shudder usage just skyrocket for sure.
Oh, I agree too. I have a Samsung Smart TV, and for the longest time I couldn't get the Shudder app, so I had to play it through my Xbox. That was like the only way you could do it, was to download the app through the Xbox store. And it was so like glitchy, and it really struggled, and a lot of times it wouldn't even buffer the films correctly. And ever since they've done the streaming app for my Samsung TV, it's so nice because I can just open up the app. It's always really smooth. It operates really well. And ever since that happens, it's like, oh, between that and watching films on my phone, like it's just, it's great. And they really do have a great collection. And what Ray and I are going to talk about today is we are going to talk about a blend of some of our favorite Shudder original films and Shudder exclusive films. So not necessarily films that are just like produced by Shudder, but films that Shudder have put on the service themselves. And yeah, I'm really excited to see your list, Ray. I'm curious if we'll have any crossover or not.
We'll see. We will see if you'd like, because I feel like you have a lot more to say about Shudder because you've been with it a lot longer than I have as far as digesting their catalog. I can go ahead and kick us off, and I wanted to kick us off with a movie I actually watched last night.
Ooh, what are we talking about?
It's a Shudder exclusive. I feel like the majority of my films are going to be Shudder exclusives, but I wanted to start off with the movie She Will, which was actually added yesterday to Shudder.
And as I talked about with Ray prior to the podcast, I started this movie last night, and I have 20 minutes left in it. So I will be able to provide some insight, but not totally. But I'm excited to hear what you have to say, because I've really loved it so far.
So with that film, I don't know. I wasn't sure what to expect. The reason why I came across that film is because one of my favorite composers, Clint Mansell, announced that he scored the film. And anytime Clint Mansell is involving anything, especially horror oriented, I'm in, because the man is a genius. He knows how to score a film and add some great tension. Like, I actually ended up ordering the score without any knowledge of the movie, just because the score was so amazing, and Clint Mansell did a great job that I ordered it regardless. So I finally got to see the movie last night, and man, it was incredible. I love folk horror. I love atmospheric horror. And when you blend those two so well, there's just such a great experience to be had. I feel like this movie is one of the best feminist movies I've seen as well.
Yeah, from what I've seen so far of it, I would completely agree with you. I think it says a lot, not only about just like the perception of women and like the Hollywood machine, but I feel like, you know, the treatment of women, especially when they get to a certain age. Like, I think ageism plays a huge part in this movie. Like, this idea of, like, celebritydom from a young age. There's a lot of really great topics that are covered in the spectrum of the film.
For sure. And this movie definitely has a lot of that to say, but also in, like, a very tasteful way without feeling alienating. Because a problem that I sometimes have with some of these movies that have socio-political messages is, like, sometimes they can be alienating. And that ain't like, oh, this is dumb, this is stupid, but it's like, you know, obviously as a straight man, I don't have much to add to the female experience because I don't know what that's like. I don't know what they're going through. So sometimes some of these films, it's not that they're alienating, but like it's hard for me to relate beyond just educating myself. But movies like this one are really good at making me feel involved. Like, okay, I understand what you're going through. Yes, I never lived through it, and I'm never going to live through it. The movie's doing such a good job of conveying what they're feeling and the experiences that they deal with that they're far more engaging for me. And this was one of those that like engaged me the whole time. The cinematography was beautiful. The score, like I mentioned, is incredible. And there's like enough like small moments of levity on it. Like one of my favorite scenes, and we talked about this one, is there one of the guys in the movie is like criticizing the view of the patriarchy, saying that the patriarchy is not real and people just need to get over it. And like his hand catches fire.
It's so good. I do want to say though, talking about like the nuance in the film, one of the things I really like is, you know, the whole thing is this lead actress, she gets a double mastectomy at the beginning of the film, and she's going away to like a retreat to heal. And what we're told is when she was 13 years old, she was cast in this movie. And that Malcolm McDowell, who is just like an absolutely incredible actor, most people know him from A Clockwork Orange. He's done a lot of really great stuff over the years. But he is this director who, through this television interview, which I thought was really brilliant, they talk about like how he may have had an inappropriate relationship with her when she was 13, and the way that they like put it in her head to where she like hears the nickname that he called her and stuff, I thought was really great. But what I liked on another layer in this was that, and I thought this would be interesting to talk about, Ray, is like, yes, they talk about like how he may have had an inappropriate relationship with her. There's a lot of different discussion about that, but I like the subtlety even of like how the movie is about Navajo Indians and that the lead girl was white. And I feel like because the TV producer was like, hey, do you feel like you've done anything problematic or illegal in your career and blah, and he's like, no, every decision I've made has been blah blah blah. And I thought that was even more of an interesting commentary. They don't dwell on it for too long, and you don't really get like, unless I missed it in the last 20 minutes I haven't seen, you don't really know what the movie's about other than it's about Navajo Indians. And I thought that was really interesting that it was played by a white woman.
Also, like, now that you mentioned the part of the double mastectomy, there's also like a little bit of body dysmorphia thing going on. Like, this woman just has such a problem with having her breasts removing. Obviously, that's, you know, I can't imagine what that is like to lose a part of yourself like that. But I feel like there's also a commentary to be had about body dysmorphia and people like having taking issue with their body, and how actually, you know, traumatizing being so at odds with the way your body looks can be.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a huge predominant theme in the film that they do a really great job exploring. And like I said, I still have 20 minutes left in it to watch. But what I have seen of it so far, like, it really covers those topics really well. While also, like, even if you strip all that away, it's just a really atmospheric and eerie horror film.
Definitely. I would definitely, especially if you're a fan of, like, Saint Maud, The Witch, Black Coat's Daughter, like, those atmospheric type movies, this one's up your alley for sure.
Well, I'm excited to finish it. I'm sure that it'll probably be on one of my favorites of the year, because so far I've already been loving it.
So what's you? What do you got for me?
All right, so first up I want to talk about also a film that was released on Shudder really recently, and this is a Shudder original film called Deadstream.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to try to squeeze this one this week, but I couldn't.
So I don't have a whole lot to say about Deadstream. It's not like a super complex movie, but it's about a guy who was a YouTube streamer that all he does is he goes and does these extreme stunts. He does something that we're not told what it is that causes his YouTube channel to be demonetized. And so he finally gets monetization back, he gets a sponsorship, and he decides that to get back in the game and to get viewership back, that he's going to visit one of the most haunted houses in America. And he gets there, he pulls the spark plugs out of his car so he can't drive away, and he padlocks himself into the building and throws the key in a vent and sets up cameras all throughout the house to see if there's paranormal activity, and chaos ensues. This is probably like one of the most fun movies you will watch on Shudder the whole year. It very much kind of falls into like Evil Dead territory, where it's that really campy goofiness mixed in with some genuinely horrifying horror elements, and it's just an absolute blast. It does found footage in a way that I feel like is really unique, that he's live streaming, so you have like the audience members commenting during the movie, and it plays a pretty big element into the overall plot of the film. And honestly, this was just a blast. I had a smile on my face from the moment it started to the very end. And what I love is the character is really douchey, but they do a really good job of making you feel for him at moments to where you're invested enough, even though he's kind of an asshole, to where you stay invested. And I just thought Shudder did such a good job picking this one up. It's so much fun. It has great practical effects. And Ray, I have a feeling this will be one that you'll absolutely adore.
I have to check it out. Like I said, I saw the trailer. It looked like a good time. I was going to try to squish it this week, because I had a feeling you were going to talk about it, and I wanted to have something to add to it, but unfortunately didn't get to it.
Yeah, and when you do see it, we can talk about it, because I'll be really interested to hear your opinion. But this is a movie that's like almost all practical effects, and they do such a great job with it. It really felt like something out of a different era, which is something I always appreciate.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm excited to watch it then. I did notice just from the trailer alone that like the practical effects of like whatever those creatures or monsters or zombies or whatever they are, they look really eerie. Like they look really creepy, but in like a low budget kind of way.
Yeah, and then the haunted house production design that he goes into, it's so disgusting and dilapidated that it really just like puts you in that environment. And the house is in the middle of nowhere, so that isolation that you feel even adds on to that even more. And what I love is that, you know, you get those horror tropes all the time where you're like, why are people going here? Why are they doing this? And it's like from the initial shot, you know this guy is an idiot extremist YouTuber who is going to make the most irrational and stupid decisions possible to get views on the internet. And something about that made it even more enjoyable.
Oh, I'm excited to watch it. I'm so excited to watch it then.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So that's all my thoughts on Deadstream. It's not like a super thought-provoking think piece. It's just a fun horror comedy that really made me happy this time of year.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to push it up closer to the top of my list for sure then.
Absolutely. So I'm ready for your next one. Hit me with it.
So the next one, and I want to introduce it with a little preface of a little cool experience I had over the weekend. Spoiler alert, it's not dark glasses, but it involves dark glasses, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So as we talked about Shudder and Shudder growing, I'm really excited to see Shudder like getting bigger and reaching more audience. So I went to watch a movie over the weekend, and I'll tell you more about it later when we talk about what we checked out. But the movie was an IFC movie. It was like from that IFC studio, if you've heard of them. So I saw it in the movie theater itself. So on the trailers, they played the trailer for Dark Glasses. And it was so cool to be able to see like Shudder original in a movie theater, like just the banner of Shudder original being played in a giant screen in a movie theater. That was such a cool experience. So being able to see some of these Shudder movies get more recognition, more brand recognition is getting really cool. And this is another movie. This is actually a Shudder original that it too is getting recognition, and it got recognition by getting picked up by the Criterion Collection. And the movie I want to talk about is the Guatemalan film La Llorona,
which I have not seen, and I know we talked about this beforehand, but I'll be really interested to hear what you have to say about it, because I saw the La Llorona film in the Conjuring universe, which is not a very good movie. So, which also came out the same year.
Which is funny because when I watched, I didn't see that movie in the Conjuring universe because the second I was like, oh, a movie about La Llorona that takes place in New York now or in L.A. No, I'm out. I'm out.
It's not very good. You're not missing out. But literally everything I've heard about this movie, I've heard nothing but amazing things. So I'll be excited to hear what you have to say, because I think that the lore behind La Llorona in general is really fascinating, and it's also like it's horror in a way that's grounded in reality. That's very sad. And it's like very realistic, and horror lore that kind of embeds itself in tragic stories is always the most fascinating to me.
Well, so like La Llorona, at least where I grew up in El Salvador, it's a legend, and it's a very tragic story, very horrific and tragic. And Jairo Bustamante, he's a Guatemalan filmmaker, and he actually, like, when he filmed La Llorona, it first of all, it takes place in Guatemala. They filmed it in Guatemala using all like Guatemalan and even some like indigenous actors in it, of which added a whole new level of reality to it. You know, you have some of the dialects being used. It's very like true to the setting, and also like it's very art housey. Like you get a lot of like art house filmmaking in it, but they also tap into the more realistic part of La Llorona. And it follows a character, this man that's running for office in Guatemala, who has a very problematic past, that committed a mass genocide of indigenous people in Guatemala, and now he's running for office. And this indigenous girl shows up to be like the maid to take care of the house, and the second she shows up, like basically a haunting begins at this like mansion, trying to like scare this politician off so he doesn't run for office. And you're following a trial. It has a lot of like very like courtroom drama moments, but at the same time you have the haunting happening in the house, and this man going kind of insane because he's being haunted by the ghost of all the indigenous people that he killed. And it sticks more true. I mean, there has been some liberties taken with the legend, but it sticks more true with the legend of La Llorona that I grew up with than whatever the hell Hollywood did that same year with The Conjuring.
They didn't cast Linda Cardellini and had her kids just be like, oh no, she's trying to drown me in the swimming pool.
Look, I love Linda Cardellini.
So do I.
but no, that was bad.
Yeah, it's and you know what's funny? Like, it's not a good movie, but it's also not like the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It's those Conjuring universe films are fun. I have a soft spot in my heart for a lot of those.
But in a world where like we want to see more representation, I mean, it doesn't get more pure to the story than that. I mean, I'm sure you can do like a straight beat by beat adaptation of the story, but this is as good as we've ever gotten. And Shudder picked it up, and the fact that Shudder, you know, and Criterion are joining forces on this one, I'm gonna go pick this one up the second it's released. It comes out at the end of the month, so I'm gonna obviously pick it up for the Criterion sale next month. But yeah, that's a fantastic movie.
I'm gonna add this to the top of my list because you've talked about it a couple times on the podcast, and there's no excuse for me not to watch it. So I'm gonna push it to the top of my list of things to watch here in the next like week or so.
Awesome. You'll have to let me know what you think.
Absolutely. So are you ready for my next one?
Let's do it.
So my next one, believe it or not, is another Shudder original that was released this year. I've got a few of those on my list because I think it's fun to talk about them. I talked about a film this year that I absolutely hated, which was called Bodies, 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 that was supposed to be a Gen Z commentary film. And this was a film that was very similar, but done in a very incredible and intelligent way, and that is the film Sissy.
Oh, I did. Also, another one I haven't seen, but I've definitely seen the little icon pop up.
Yeah, so it is fantastic. It's about this young girl. Her name is Cecilia, who she has a YouTube channel that she does like mental health positivity, and she like tries to be this positive influence for people. And if it gives you an idea of the film, Ray, it starts off, she's sitting in this room and she's surrounded by all these beautiful plants, and like she's like telling people how to be positive and to bring this ray of energy, and the camera the entire time is like creeping backwards, and you're like, what what's this gonna do? So it creeps backwards, and she's got this set built in her house where everything else around her, she's got clothes thrown all over the place. Her dishes are like overflowing in her sink. Like her house is like really disgustingly lit and gross. Really immediately kind of showing you that dichotomy between the internet persona that people create for themselves and the real life, like honest life that these people live, which I thought was a brilliant way just visually to show you what the film was going to go for right out of the gate. So she ends up going to the grocery store and running into her friend from elementary school named Emma, who invites her to come to her like party that she's having pre-bachelorette party for her wedding. So she goes there and the two of them hang out a little bit. She says, hey, I'm gonna have my bachelorette party at this cabin in the woods. You should come out with me and hang out with me and my friends. I haven't seen you in so long. It would be so nice to get a chance to see you. And she's like, sure. So she gets in the car. She goes out there with her. Well, what they don't tell her is Bully, who made fun of her in high school, who they have or in elementary school, that they have a very traumatic past, is there at the house. And when they get there, people start getting killed off one by one. And this movie really took me by surprise. It's obviously a really poignant commentary on like internet culture, the way we treat each other, mental health, but it's also just a really brutal slasher movie that the kills are violent. Like, it doesn't pull back whatsoever. I was really surprised. One of the last kills in the movie, I kind of like was cringing a little bit because of how violent and bloody it is. And it's all practical. Like, there's virtually no CGI in it, which was really impressive. And it was just an amazing film that is truly hilarious, but at the same time is a really grounded film about like how kids treat each other and how we, you know, the youth perceive each other. And I just thought that it was so well handled and it was really well made. And I think this is one, Ray, that when you go to check it out, I think you're really going to like it a lot. It was really surprising.
I have to check it out. That kind of almost sounds like a horror version of like Lord of the Flies or something like that.
It's really well done, and obviously there's a lot of like really pitch perfect dialogue between these characters about like how kids treat each other and like the internet culture as a whole. And I just thought that it was really brilliant, and it took me by surprise. Like, Shudder's really been knocking it out of the park this year with a lot of really great movies, and this is another original that I'm like, man, if this would have got a theatrical release, this would have blown like Bodies in those other films out of the water. It's so much better in every way. So I'll be interested to hear what you think when you see this one, Ray. All right, what you got for me?
So this one was one that I was a little reluctant to put on because I didn't want to fanboy out too much, putting two movies involving the same actor. But you know what? It's the Film Monsters podcast. We're agents of chaos. We do what we want. This is one out of two movies that I'm going to be talking about featuring the incomparable Nicolas Cage.
Oh, is it Prisoners of Ghostland?
Yes, it is, my friend.
I still have not seen Prisoners of Ghostland.
One of the wackiest movies I've seen. This one is not horror. I would not say this movie is a horror movie. It has horror elements, but I wouldn't say it's a horror movie. This movie is insane. And when I mean by insane, I'm not talking about like, oh my goodness, it's taking twists and turns. No, I can see people hating this movie. I can see you watching this movie and be like, Ray, what did you make me watch? But me personally, I loved it. It has charm. It has a lot of comedy. It has Nicolas Cage screaming the word testicle. Yeah, it's zany. Also, there's something really interesting about the choice of them mixing this like Western world mixed with like Japanese culture, and then this like wasteland. It's just such a zany movie. I actually also had a chance to watch this in theater, and it was incredible to see this in theater. But the director, his name is Sion Sono. I don't know much about him. I know that he is a Japanese filmmaker. I don't know, like I said, that there's not a lot that I know about him. Casting Nicolas Cage to be this like ridiculous kind of hero, but super flawed, and he's, you know, he is being tried for like committed a crime, and he's being tried for it. And as part of lowering his sentence, they send him to rescue the daughter of the mayor of the town, who was played by, I believe her name is Sofia Boutella. And it's just this rescue mission, basically. But Nicolas Cage, as you know, he can't just play like the straight man. He has to add some form of insanity to his character, and this one's no different. And yeah, this is basically this whole story of Nicolas Cage trying to kind of redeem himself by rescuing this girl, and then there's some twists and turns, and you find out why the girl escaped, and you have this whole ordeal where you're mixing like Japanese samurai culture and like the old American Western cowboy mishmash into one world, and it's really cool to see. But when I say this movie's crazy, I'm not telling you you're gonna watch a Barbarian where you're like twist and turn. No, this movie is crazy because it's insane.
And that is what I have heard about that movie, is that it's absolutely insane. And obviously, me being a huge Nicolas Cage fan, I need to check it out at some point. I've seen the trailer for it and have an idea enough to know what kind of a direction it takes, and that's something I can appreciate.
And you get to hear Nicolas Cage scream the word testicle. I won't give you the context of it, but it's worth it.
That seems like all I need to watch the movie is hearing him scream the word testicle.
It's amazing. It's the best part of the movie. I still quote it all the time.
That is wonderful. I cannot wait to see that movie. Even the poster looks amazing.
And the music is great, too. I picked that up from Waxwork. It's amazing.
So you ready for my next one?
Let's do it.
So this is a film that came out in 2020. I feel like I did not hear anyone talk about this movie at all. This genuinely had one of the most terrifying third acts of any film I've watched in recent memory, and that is the Irish horror film Caveat.
I haven't even seen that one.
Yeah, it's horrifying. You've probably seen the poster on Shudder. It has like a weird little like bunny rabbit on it. The movie simply is about this guy. His name's Isaac. And he is kind of like living on his own. He's struggling to kind of get through the day-to-day. And he gets contacted by this friend of his who says, hey, I need you to do this job for me. And he's like, okay, well, what is it? And he said, well, your niece is getting really sick. She doesn't have anyone to take care of her. And I need you to go watch her. She's living at her old family house. And she refuses to leave. And she has this issue where she goes completely catatonic for periods of time, and she doesn't move anywhere. And we're scared to death that she's going to hurt herself because her family died, and please go do this for me. So he agrees to go out there. Well, this island is so secluded. You drive out there, you have to take like a rowboat across, and it's just like a house sitting on this island by itself. And so he gets there and he says, hey, there's one caveat to this situation. And he says, okay, well, what is it? And he said, she doesn't really trust anyone, and she has like a hard time believing people won't run out on her. So you have to wear this vest that the woman of the house used to wear that is like attached in the basement, that was for sleepwalking, so that she wouldn't sleepwalk out and fall into the water and drown. And so he's trapped in the house with this young girl who doesn't hardly talk. She's like catatonic. It's so creepy. She sits in the corner of the room with her hands over her eyes and doesn't move. And so he's in this dilapidated, disgusting house by himself, and all this creepy shit starts to happen. And it truly is just like psychologically disturbing and violent, and has one of the craziest third act twists I've seen in a while. And I cannot believe more people didn't talk about this movie. It's super simplistic, gorgeous cinematography, and really atmospheric. I think you would really love this one, Ray.
I'm going to add it to my list right now.
And it's a super brisk runtime, so I feel like it won't be hard for you to get through. So, all right, Ray, I'm ready. Get me with your next one.
Well, you know it. You know what movie I'm going to bring up. I don't know why we're beating around the bush. You know it's going to be The Color Out of Space.
The Color Out of Space, another Nicolas Cage banger. I'm really excited. I really enjoyed this movie. It was very silly and over the top, but also had some really grounded horror elements in it that I really enjoyed.
I love H.P. Lovecraft. A lot of people thought I was weird for this, but this was my favorite movie of 2020.
I mean, knowing the things you love, it does not surprise me that this was your favorite movie of 2020.
But the reason why this movie was my favorite of 2020, obviously I love Nicolas Cage, I love H.P. Lovecraft, I love cosmic horror. It had everything that I love in one movie, but also 2020 was just such a drag of a year that like this movie was just perfect because it had horror, it had sci-fi, it had crazy Nicolas Cage channeling his Vampire's Kiss character. There was so much going for it, and it was just such a fun watch for me. Every time I watch this movie, I just have fun with it. Colin Stetson's very ambient score was incredible too. Shout out to Waxwork for also putting it out. I love this movie in every way. This is one of the few movies, I feel like Nicolas Cage has had this renaissance where his acting abilities are being put to use in where they were supposed to always have been used. In movies like Color Out of Space, where he channels this really zany persona when he gets possessed. And it's very reminiscent of Vampire's Kiss, like the way how he behaves on Vampire's Kiss, but it works on this movie because he is supposed to be crazy. He is supposed to be unhinged. And, you know, the scene where he's throwing the tomatoes.
Absolutely. There's some great one-liners in this, but what I really like is the movie, it's not like, it's a little under 2 hours, but I feel like it does a really good job of kind of building that atmosphere before it kind of blows up into insanity.
I feel like there was also this whole thing going on with the director, Richard Stanley, who I guess has had kind of a problematic life. Just not because he's done anything other than he's just a really eccentric guy and got kicked out of when he was filming The Island of Dr. Moreau. Was kicked out of it and just he's kind of a weird dude. So I guess, and maybe there is some problematic things about him that I'm not aware of, but I know that Elijah Wood, another movie spearheaded by Elijah Wood and Spectre Vision, really tried really hard to get Richard Stanley to come out of retirement to be able to put this one. And yeah, it was great. I love this movie. I mean, if you're familiar with the short story The Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft, it follows it pretty well. It's a pretty good modern adaptation of it. I love it. You have really wacky characters like the daughter who is claims to be like a witch and practices witchcraft. And I thought it was also really poignant that knowing, and this is on a more serious note, something that I loved about this movie is that the one character with more of a common sense, the one character that's a little bit more grounded is an African American man who, if you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, he was not very kind on African American and other minorities. He has a very problematic past with that. So the fact that they took an H.P. Lovecraft property but then made the one black man in the movie kind of the grounded one, I thought that was really a really poignant thing to do.
Oh, for sure. That's such an interesting perspective on that too. And yeah, this is a movie, I had a lot of fun with it. I feel like the visuals are incredible, especially in the third act. But it really does take its time to build up that suspense and that dread. And also while making you laugh. And Nicolas Cage does go fully unhinged in this movie in the best way possible.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. I love Nick Cage. We love Nick Cage. If it wasn't because I hate the man so much, I would totally try to do my best impersonation of the former president and just be like, we love Nick Cage, folks. We love him here.
We do love Nick Cage all the time, and that will never change.
So, Color Out of Space, go check it out. Shudder exclusive. Do it up.
Absolutely. So my next film is one that I think you'll appreciate. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, but the director of this film, prior to making this film, has made 31 Christmas films for the Hallmark Channel and decided that apparently he needed to get all of his demons out in one movie and decided to make a film called Anything for Jackson.
I haven't even heard of that one either.
So when I tell you about this, you'll be like, what kind of repressed feelings does this guy have that makes all these Hallmark movies? So the movie is about this elderly couple who their daughter and grandson die in a tragic accident. They kidnap a pregnant patient and they try to perform a reverse exorcism on her pregnant child by putting their grandchild into the baby.
What?
And they are devout Satanists. It is done in probably the most comical way possible. They go to this library basement where they go to these meetings of Satanists. And the entire movie is the repercussions of them attempting to do this reverse exorcism. It is hilarious. It is disturbing, like very disturbing, and incredibly violent in the best way possible. And when I watched this, I was like, oh, I really want to see what other stuff that this director has done. And I went online and was like, he made a bunch of Hallmark Christmas movies. So it was clearly his way of kind of stepping out of his comfort zone and doing something different. But it is a wild movie, like truly just one of the most bizarre, wild, and insane films I've ever seen. It just gets so insane with even like the timeline of the film, and I don't want to get too into detail about it, but it's really just an experience. And I think if you get a chance to watch it, Ray, this is one you'll really enjoy. I don't want to get into too much more detail about it because it'll spoil the movie, but I loved this. I thought that it was super unique, really well shot, incredibly well acted, just a really fun time.
Oh man, you're just killing it with all of these that I haven't seen.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a Shudder fanboy. I've watched my fair share of Shudder films over the years.
Okay, so I want to do something before we get to our number one pick.
Yes.
Just really quickly, let's not spend too much time on it. Give me 3 honorable mentions, just real quickly.
3 honorable mentions. Okay, so from this year, Hellbender. I've mentioned it before on the podcast. Absolutely amazing movie. You should definitely check it out. The Dark and the Wicked from Brian Bertino. One of my favorite horror movies of the past, 5 years. You should definitely watch it. And a found footage film called The Medium that was absolutely amazing. You should 100% check that out as well.
Awesome. For me, I'm going to go, we've talked about this in the past, Revenge.
Yes, Revenge is amazing.
Revenge, amazing, like female badassery, so Revenge for sure. Random Acts of Violence, a really cool slasher. We talked about it on the slasher episode that we did. I've said plenty about it, but I can't stress enough. It's not a perfect movie, but it is a good time with really, really creative kills. And I also am a big fan of, what's one I watched a long time ago? I'm trying to remember the name. Dead Shack, that's what it is. It's like a horror comedy that it's about zombies, and it's just a ridiculous premise. It's just a silly horror zombie movie. Sometimes those are really fun to just put on and enjoy, like a really silly movie about 2 really awkward teenagers battling zombies. So, Dead Shack, really cool movie. And for my number one pick, are you ready? My number one pick is actually the first or second movie. No, the first one was Mandy. So this was the second movie from Shudder that I ever saw. And it stars 2 incredible people. One of them being Mr. Steven Yeun of The Walking Dead fan, and the incomparable, and who's starting out to be one of my favorite actresses, Samara Weaving. And the movie I'm talking about is Mayhem,
which I still have not seen.
Oh, I adore this movie. This is one of the few movies that I ended up purchasing. Even though I had Shudder, I still purchased it because I just wanted to own it. Steve Moore of the band Zombie did the score, which is an incredible score. The basic premise of this movie, there is this virus that gets injected in the air. And what the virus does is that it makes you act on your most deep and darkest desires, and it just makes you completely unhinged, and you just act on your biggest desires, whether it be violence, whether it be sexual, whether it be whatever it may be. And the movie starts off by Steven Yeun is this really douchey lawyer guy that works at a law firm, and Samara Weaving is there trying to get this lawyer firm to help her out to get her her mom's house back, and they're being really rude to her, so she's really upset about it. And Steven Yeun gets wrapped up in a controversy and gets fired. And meanwhile, both of these events happen, the virus gets released into the building, and they put the building on lockdown for 8 hours, and everyone becomes absolutely violent and unhinged, and it becomes one of the funniest violent horror comedies I've seen in a while.
That sounds absolutely awesome. I think I've told you before how much I love Samara Weaving, so I feel like, and Steven Yeun is always amazing, so I guarantee you that I will absolutely love it.
It's incredible, and the score is great too. done by Steve Moore from the band Zombie. I think I mentioned that earlier. And he's incredible at adding such awesome like mood to this and just making it epic, but at the same time, like, and what's great about it, it's like, it's not just like this straightforward, like, violent horror movie. It's also like, you know, you find out that Steve Yeun was actually a really nice guy that had to kind of start playing the game to climb up the ladder at his job, and Samara Weaving is actually this really thoughtful girl, but because of this virus that has been injected, they are just like insane. They're just unhinged. And, you know, there's so many awesome moments of comedy. I mean, we've all worked at that job that we hated, where we wish we could have punched our boss in the face. So this movie is kind of like we can vicariously live through this movie. It's a fun time. That's the thing. It's like, it's a fun time. It's one of the few movies that I actually ended up just purchasing because I wanted to own it. Because in case it ever comes off a Shudder, especially being a Shudder exclusive, then I'm like, I want to have this one for sure to always go back to. And yeah, Mayhem is incredible, and I can't recommend it enough to people.
I definitely should check that out. It sounds like it's a really good time and something that I really enjoy. I love movies that are just like chaotic and absurd.
And this one is definitely both.
That's exactly what I want. And you'll laugh because my last pick is also chaotic and absurd.
Oh, do tell.
So I had to pick a movie that kind of like sums up the reason why I love Shudder, and that is because they will take a chance on the most ridiculous and absurd films that you can possibly imagine. And so the last film I want to talk about is the movie Slacks.
Of course! I still haven't seen it.
I love Slacks. And the reason why I love it is this was a movie that Jess and I sat down one night and I was like, I want to watch this movie. It's probably going to be really stupid and horrible, but a movie about a killer pair of jeans is something that I have to watch. And what I did not expect was for this film to have an incredibly poignant commentary and to be very intelligently written. And it is incredible. Like, I honestly have seen this movie, I want to say 4 or 5 times now, and I love it more every time I watch it. So pretty much simplistically, you have this young girl who wants to work at this clothing store, and it's this high-end clothing store. She goes in, they essentially tell her that she can't start working until she like buys new clothes from the store. And so they're doing an overnight reset to get ready for this new pair of jeans that's going to be released the next day. And the jeans start to come to life and kill people. Well, what you find out is there's a reason why they're coming to life, and it all has to do with where the genes have been imported from. And it becomes this really poignant commentary on like child labor in other countries and like abuse of labor workers, and it's really comedic and funny while also being very grounded and realistic. And I appreciated that because a movie like this could really just be an hour and a half of like dumb stupidity. Like a movie I think of that I love from the 1980s is Chopping Mall, which is just a really stupid and fun movie that I love. But this ends up becoming a really intelligent and thought-provoking commentary that I don't think anyone who saw the poster for this film probably would have expected. But it's just a blast. It has a great soundtrack. It's just so much fun, and I would recommend, if you have a Shudder subscription, just go watch this. You will have a great time with it.
I've seen the trailer. Honestly, I love, because for those of you that don't know, Shudder does, much like Netflix or Hulu or all these streaming services, like when you select the movie, you get the banner up top, and it's always like a banner that's trying to sell you on the movie. And I love the banner that they used for this one because it's the girl like being choked out by the pair of jeans.
Yes, it's amazing. Like, literally, the things that happen in that movie and the way that the genes go about killing people, you would never expect. Like, I was like, there's like 2 or 3 ways I could assume a pair of jeans would kill people, but they really kind of take it in the most absurd directions imaginable, and I think it's something, Ray, that you will appreciate big time.
I will. Sounds like I have to change my ways and go watch Slacks.
You 100% should watch Slacks. It's a great movie. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I could mention it on this podcast episode. So yeah, that is Ray and I's list of Shudder films that you should go check out. There's obviously like 100 more. Speaking of Ray talking about partnership deals, that film Watcher that came out this year, that was an IFC midnight movie, was absolutely incredible. Shudder managed to get the rights of that. They're doing a really great job of picking up really amazing material and putting it on their streaming service. So just go check it out. I know for the Halloween season, you can normally find like promo codes for like a week free trial. Go test it out and go see if you like it. I'm sure you will.
They also, and, I just want to point this out real quick too. They also have really cool TV shows as well. They have done like a reboot of like the Creep Show, where it's like this episodic anthology show. They have some really cool docuseries like Cursed Films or History of Horror by Eli Roth. They also even have some Walking Dead adjacent stuff because they have signed a partnership with AMC. So they have a lot of cool stuff. One of my favorite TV shows just that I've been really enjoying right now is the 101 Scariest Moments in Horror. They have a lot of cool docuseries too. So like even if you're like, oh, I don't feel like watching like these B movie horrors, they also have like a lot of docuseries, and you can learn a lot about history of horror and stuff like that. That's super fascinating. In fact, I actually find myself watching a lot of these docuseries quite often because it's fascinating hearing all these stories about how some of these horror movies were made.
Also, Shudder has one of my favorite shows ever made, the Boulet Brothers Dragula, which is an alternative drag series that is like one of the most unique and awesome shows, especially when it comes to representation in the horror community. Super talented artists, and compared to like, people when they think of drag, which like before I watched this show, I really didn't know anything about like drag performance art, but like people are familiar with RuPaul, but this show, it's like people do horror themed drag competitions where it's like, hey, model this look off of like a famous horror icon, and then the bottom 3 people in the competition have to like jump out of an airplane or get a tattoo or do all these crazy things. It's so much fun. I'm so glad Shudder takes the risks on some of these shows. They really do have amazing programming outside of just their regular movies.
And they just debuted. I haven't seen it. I don't know if you have, but I have heard amazing things about Queer of Horror.
So have I. I can't wait to see it.
Which is like a show about the history of the queer community in horror culture. And I'm so excited to watch it. So they, like, even if you're like, oh man, like, I don't know if I want to watch these like bonkers, like zany B movies, their programming is top notch too.
Absolutely. So, on top of talking about Shudder, Ray, and I know you watched She Will, but what have you been watching this week? What do you want to bring up?
There's a couple. There's a few, actually. I'm going to bring 3 up.
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
going to keep it brief, but I'm going to bring 3 up. The first one that I watched, I finally watched. Before Dark Glasses, I had never seen an Argento movie, but I finally watched an Argento-related movie from the 80s called Demons.
What did you think of Demons?
That movie is absolutely insane. The insanity level of that movie is absolutely ridiculous. I actually really enjoyed the makeup, the prosthetics, all the practical effects of it. Those demons, even though it was like, this is one of those B movies from like the 80s, they're legitimately creepy and eerie and so unhinged. I loved it. I actually really loved it. The score was ridiculous because it's a very like heavy metal punk rock score or soundtrack, I should say, and it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous movie, but at the same time, like the actual like prosthetics and special effects and all the practicality of it and the makeup, it was legitimately creepy. I really enjoyed it. It was a bonkers movie, but I really enjoyed it. Other one I watched, I went to the theaters to see a movie. This one isn't a horror movie, but I loved it nonetheless. It's an IFC movie that's one I was mentioning earlier. It's called Vesper. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I have not heard of it.
Vesper, it's like... So here's the thing. I've read on Letterboxd a lot of people kind of trashing on this movie because it's so like by the numbers and so like generic. But if I'm being honest, like I don't have a problem with generic and by the numbers as long as it's executed properly. Like I feel like Vesper is one of those movies that, yeah, we've seen this story 1,000 times, but it was done in such a great and thoughtful way that I couldn't help myself by being absolutely enamored by this movie. And the premise, it's a really simple premise of like a post-apocalyptic world where all the animals have died off and there's 2 class systems. There's the elite, like rich people, and then there's like all the people living in poverty. And they've worked deals that the citadels, which is what they call them, they sell seeds to the poor people so they can harvest them, but they have found a way how to code seeds where you can only get 1 harvest out of them, and then you have to go buy more off of them. So this girl is trying to basically survive and figure out a way how they can live without relying on these citadels. It's like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie with a girl protagonist. We've seen that 1,000 times, but this one did it in a way that I found myself really like captivated by it. The visuals, the music, the acting, because she's not like this angsty 13-year-old girl, but she's actually like really strong and solid, and I really enjoyed her performance. And everybody in the movie is great. Like I said, it's a story we've seen 12 times. It was done in such a way that I couldn't help but be really excited about it, and you'll probably be hearing me talk about it a little bit more when we do our best of the year episodes, because it's definitely among my top 10 of the year. Like I said, it's nothing new. It's nothing that we haven't seen before, but it was done in a way that I could really appreciate it a ton, for sure.
That sounds really fascinating. I'll have to check that out. That's not even a movie that I'd even heard about, so I'll definitely need to check it out.
And obviously it's not a perfect movie. I have my qualms with it. There were some moments in the movie where there were some choices made that I was like, this is kind of dumb. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time with it, and yeah, I'm excited to hopefully pick it up later on and own it and watch it over and over again. The last movie I wanted to bring up, because I didn't want to take too much time, because I know I said I had a few. Disney Plus Werewolf by Night.
I've heard nothing but good things about it.
The movie was incredible. I know we've been known to trash a little bit on the Marvel movies, but this one totally blew me away. I loved it. It's totally a love letter to the old Universal monster movies. It was shot in black and white, mostly in black and white. There's some colors. It's a short film. It's like 50 minutes long. I complain that I wish it was longer, but it was done phenomenally. The score is incredible. Michael Giacchino both scored and directed the movie. It was amazing. It was a great movie. It's a good time. Obviously, it's a fun Marvel movie at the end of the day, but they pushed the boundaries. I think because it's a black and white movie, they felt like they could get away with a little bit more violence and more graphic violence. And I feel like if this movie was colored, it probably would have pushed for an R rating for sure with the violence, but because it's black and white, they're able to get away with a little bit more. But for all of you out there that are like off put by black and white and have never given black and white movies a chance, I think this is a good opportunity to have a jumping point for black and white movies, because this movie is incredible. It's probably my favorite thing Marvel has done in a long time, for sure.
And that is high praise, so I will definitely have to watch that.
So those are the three that I wanted to focus on this year. I've watched a bunch this week, but those are the three that I'm gonna leave it at for now.
I too have watched a bunch, and I will do three as well, but I will quickly mention one and then talk about the other two. So the first one I quickly want to mention is I rewatched *Malignant*.
Of course.
And it's incredible. Still holds up. Absolutely amazing. There's not really much more I need to say. The second thing I watched the Hellraiser reboot on Hulu. I thought it was okay. It wasn't anything super spectacular. I feel like the new interpretation of Pinhead and the Cenobites was done really well. They look amazing. They're super menacing. The third act of the movie is really great. But the issue I have with the movie is the characters are horribly written. None of the people in the movie really matter. You don't really care. They try to do the like addiction allegory like the Evil Dead remake, but they don't do a good job with it. So I don't know, I was disappointed because I felt like David Bruckner, he did a movie called The Night House, which I really liked. He's done a couple segments in like VHS and Southbound that I really enjoyed. He's a competent filmmaker, but I don't know, something about this movie, it was a slog. It was almost 2 hours long. It just felt too long, and I don't know. It's better than a lot of the Hellraiser sequels, but it's not anything spectacular, which was a little disappointing.
That's what I heard. I heard that like the biggest qualm I've heard is the characters. They're not likable at all.
No, not at all. And like I said, everybody was complaining because they casted a trans woman, Jamie Clayton, as Pinhead.
I heard she was the best part of it.
She is phenomenal. Legitimately the best part of the movie. Super menacing, incredible. Her vocal performance is amazing. And it's truly like if they would have spent more time focusing on her and the Cenobites, it would have been a more interesting movie, but just the casting was so bad. None of the characters were interesting. They were all really unlikable. And it was disappointing because I feel like it had a lot of potential. And of course, they left it open so that they could do a sequel. If they do, I hope they take more of a route of Hellraiser 2, where it's a lot more about being in the world of the Cenobites. That would be way more interesting. But I was a little disappointed.
Bummer. I was rooting so hard for you to love it.
Yeah, and then the next thing I watched was a 1986 film that I've been dying to see, which was Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, starring Mr. Michael Rooker, that people know from the Guardians of the Galaxy series.
And The Walking Dead.
Yes, this is probably one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen. It's literally about a guy named Henry who he's a serial killer and he just murders people. And he lives with this guy that he met in jail named Otis. And Otis's sister comes to visit, and Henry and Otis's sister start to get close, and this movie was bleak. The film is shot very differently, where there are acts of violence depicted, but at the beginning of the film, all you see is still images of like the dead bodies, and you hear audio in the background of him committing the atrocity. So it's really your brain kind of piecing together these horrible things that happen. And later on in the movie, you do see more of the violence depicted, but I felt like your brain filling in the blanks was almost more horrifying. And then this Otis character, he was in jail with him, and one day they're out and they end up killing someone together. And so Otis, who isn't a serial killer, ends up getting drawn into Henry's world, and they start committing these horrible atrocities together. And it's really just a film that explores the human psyche in its most demented form. I watched this, it was streaming on the Criterion channel, and I checked it out, but it's also streaming on Shudder if you have a Shudder subscription. And it's very similar to the 1980s film I talk about all the time, Maniac. It's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely incredibly disturbing. But if you're into that, like diving into the psyche of a serial killer, because this is actually based off of 2 real killers that existed, it's really fascinating, and you should definitely check it out if that's your kind of thing.
Yeah, these are the type of movies that, like, when I hear people talk about, like, oh, Jeffrey Dahmer story, it's like, that's so horrible and disturbing. I'm like, you haven't seen Disturbing.
No, exactly. You watch this movie and you're like, holy shit, some of the stuff that these guys do, it's like, it's disturbing as can be. But it was really great. And Michael Rooker's performance, possibly the best of his whole career.
Wow.
Yeah, he's truly amazing in it. But that's what Ray and I watched this week. We had a really good time talking about it. And Ray, would you like to tell people what we're going to discuss on next week's episode?
Well, we are gutted, heartbroken, because by the time the next episode airs, which will be towards the tail end of October, we will be getting close to the end of the spookiest of seasons and the best of seasons, and we're heartbroken, but nevertheless, we keep our heads high, and we're going to talk about Halloween, the best time of the year. We want to just touch base on Halloween, talk about Halloween-based movies, what Halloween means to us, just the love that we have for this holiday. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, somebody told me, you take this holiday too seriously, and I really do, but there's a reason why, and we want to talk about those things, and we want to talk about why we love it so much.
Yes, and I'm super excited. So obviously we'll talk about some movies that kind of get us in that spirit, talk about why the holiday is important to both of us, and I think it'll just be a fun episode. I really like this like loose format that we've been doing. I feel like it gives us the ability to discuss a lot more movies than we can when we're building lists up, and it just seems to work out really well. And you guys let us know if you're enjoying that format. Head over to the Film Monsters Podcast Instagram, leave us a comment, let us know if you've been enjoying this format of the episodes, because Ray and I really like it. I really enjoy this format.
Yeah, no, me too. I'm really stoked. I feel like it's a way we can sneak in more movies without making our episodes 5 hours long.
Absolutely. So, as I said at the beginning of the episode, we're in the middle of the 31 Wax Hauntings Challenge. You can always jump in, even by the time this episode premieres, which I think is like the 19th of October, so it'll be a little later in the month. You can jump on, comment, do whatever you'd like. Ray and I always appreciate it. So you can follow us at the Film Monsters Podcast, and you can also follow Ray and I at our personal Instagrams, at AnalogC and at MyExitUnfair. We always love chatting with you guys, hearing feedback. Most of all, Ray and I just love doing these episodes. I look forward to it every week, and doing these spooky episodes has been great, and we really appreciate you all for listening. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.